On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, day 275. More information has been published on the hostage negotiations. Hamas has eased its demand for a complete ceasefire already in phase 1 of the deal, but added new demands with regards to the negotiations and extended truce for phase 2. Israeli Prime Minister published a list of 5 demands, toughening the negotiation stance and adding new demands as well. Israeli sources are dismayed, saying that the timing of Netanyahu's statements may foil the deal. Intensive fighting throughout the Gaza Strip. The Al-Qassam brigades reported targeting IDF tanks in Rafah, while the IDF has issued new evacuation orders to Palestinians in Gaza City. Major escalations between Israel and Hezbollah. Dozens of Katyusha missiles and rockets fired by Hezbollah following the IDF's assassination of a senior figure in Hezbollah's air defense units in Baalbek. Day of disruption called in Israel as thousands take to the streets, demanding a hostage deal and calling for new elections in the country. Hello everyone, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the latest highlights from the Israel-Hamas War. It's currently the evening of July 7th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of July 8th, 2024 in the Middle East. Today has marked 9 months since the war began. Starting with the hostage situation, there have been several different developments with regards to the hostage deal in the past 2 days. On July 6th, more information was released about what has been reported as the major breakthrough in Hamas's answer, which has now allowed for the negotiating teams to start meeting again. The main development is that up until now, the group was demanding to agree on a complete ceasefire and end to the war, already in the first 6-week phase of the deal, whereas in the new response, the group does not demand that and instead allows for negotiations on what will happen after the first 6 weeks to occur during the truce. In other words, the first phase of the deal, the humanitarian deal, quote-unquote, focusing on the release of female hostages, elderly and sick, can commence without the group already receiving a guarantee of a ceasefire and end to the war. Alongside this, however, a close reading of Hamas's response reveals that the group has changed different clauses within the proposal in addition to that one, such that in effect it will still be guaranteeing an ongoing ceasefire from phase 1. Hamas is insisting that the negotiations over phase 2 and 3 will commence within 16 days of when the truce begins, i.e. 16 days into phase 1. However, the group changed the wording of that clause such that there will be no deadline for negotiations, and they can continue beyond the first 6 weeks. In addition to that, all of the terms of phase 1, including a ceasefire, IDF redeployment, and increased humanitarian aid, will remain in effect as long as negotiations continue, which could theoretically continue endlessly. A senior Hamas official speaking to AP on July 6 confirmed this, stating that Hamas demands an Israeli agreement that negotiations will continue until the second phase of the deal is reached, which in essence means once the truce commences in the first phase, there will be no return to fighting, which is something that Israel has consistently said it is not going to agree upon. Asharq al-Awsat also confirmed this, stating that Hamas received assurances from the negotiating countries that entering into a long-term negotiating process during the first phase of the ceasefire will be a game-changer and it will for sure lead to a complete ceasefire and an end to the war. Despite this, on July 6, it was reported that the negotiating teams are going to commence meeting this week, including a high-profile meeting between the CIA Director William Barnes, head of Egyptian intelligence Abbas Kamel, the Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed Athani, and the head of the Israeli Mossad, Dadi Barnea. These are the high-profile meetings that have to occur in order to bring a truce to the table. Preliminary negotiations are due to begin in Egypt already tomorrow on Monday, and are going to continue in Qatar with this high-profile meeting on Wednesday. In addition to this, while Israel's negotiating stance is still being debated, on July 7th there were other developments on the Israeli side of the negotiations. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu published a list of 5 demands, stating that they are principles that Israel will not compromise in any deal. The 5 demands are that any deal will allow Israel to return to fighting until achieving all aims of the war, Hamas's weapon smuggling from Egypt to Gaza will be halted, armed Palestinian operatives will not be permitted to return to northern Gaza, Israel will maximize the number of live hostages that will be released, and the platform agreed upon by Israel and welcomed by President Biden will allow Israel to return the hostages without compromising the other aims of the war. In Israel, there was reported astonishment and what some described as fury within the security establishment with Netanyahu's public message, stating that it constitutes a hardening of positions right when negotiations are resuming and could foil the deal. In addition, it was later published that Netanyahu's office instructed the Israeli negotiating teams to raise the new demand that Palestinians be allowed to return to northern Gaza only after IDF inspection. This was one of the main points that caused the previous negotiation rounds to explode, and it again came under heavy criticism in the Israeli defense establishment that the Prime Minister's office is at the outset adding conditions that caused negotiations to break down last time. Right now what we're seeing is that Hamas has given a different answer that will allow negotiations to proceed. However, it has changed different clauses that are going to be something that Israel is unlikely to agree to. In turn, Israel's Prime Minister's office is also hardening the terms right before the negotiations commence. Nonetheless, the coming week is likely to be critical. We're going to have these high-profile meetings both in Egypt and in Qatar. After that, we will see if negotiations are developing and both sides are actually just starting by hardening their positions but actually willing to negotiate it, or if the situation is going to remain as a stalemate. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there were rockets and mortars that were fired from the Gaza Strip in the last 2 days. These targeted primarily the areas around the Gaza Strip, including Kfar Aza, Nahal Oz, and there were barrages of rockets that were fired towards Sderot. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF's operation in Sajaiya is still ongoing, with intensive gun battles being reported in that eastern neighborhood. Many different tunnel entrances were reportedly found, and rocket arrays were also discovered, with the military reporting that there are clear signs that Hamas is attempting to rebuild itself in the eastern neighborhood of Gaza City. On July 7th, there were several noteworthy incidents in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. An airstrike was reported by Palestinians against the school structure in Gaza City. The IDF later confirmed this, stating that it was being used by Hamas and that a weapons manufacturing area in the school were also targeted after measures were taken to minimize civilian casualties. In addition, Hamas announced that Ihab Rasin, who was a prominent figure in Hamas's government, was assassinated in Gaza City on July 7th. Rasin was previously the spokesperson of Hamas's interior ministry, and he served as deputy minister in Hamas's government since October 2020. The IDF did not make any comment about this assassination. In addition, the IDF also issued evacuation orders on July 7th to Palestinians in the Darj Tufah neighborhood, as well as in the old city of Wadarj, both in Gaza City. According to the evacuation orders, all Palestinians in the area are to immediately evacuate to safe zones in the western parts of the city. As you can see in the videos that were released here, thousands of Palestinians were seen evacuating the area throughout the day. This signals an impeding military operation that is likely to develop in the areas of Darj Tufah and in the Old City, which was somewhat expected after the IDF completed its operation in Jabalia refugee camp, again all in the different areas of Gaza City. Moving on to the central parts of the Gaza Strip, on July 6th, the IDF carried out a major airstrike in the Al-Nuseirat refugee camp, reportedly striking a school that belonged to UNRWA. Palestinian sources reported that at least 16 people were killed in this attack, saying that the school was housing internally displaced Palestinians. The IDF in turn stated that the school was attacked after intelligence information confirmed that it was being used as a Hamas headquarters, adding that measures were taken to reduce the risk of harming innocent civilians. In addition to this, on July 6th in Deir el-Balah, the IDF identified a long-distance rocket launching site that Hamas had established within a humanitarian zone. According to both Palestinian and IDF reports, the local population was cleared from the area before it was attacked, and no casualties were reported when the IDF carried out that airstrike. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, in the past 2 days, there was ongoing fighting in Rafah, particularly intensive battles that were reported in the Tel Sultan area. Al-Qassam brigades put out a statement that they managed to target at least 2 IDF tanks with Yasin 105 missiles in the area. The IDF did not confirm this, however, several IDF soldiers were reported injured in Tel Sultan. In addition, the IDF reported uncovering an underground warehouse that included weapons, explosives, charges, clips, and primed rockets. In the area known as the Saudi neighborhood in western Rafah, Palestinian sources also reported that on July 6, the IDF carried out an airstrike targeting a police car, killing at least 6 people. In addition to this, between July 6th and July 7th, the IDF carried out a significant airstrike targeting the municipality building in Han Yunis, the neighboring city of Rafah. The IDF later put out a statement stating that the building was being used by Hamas for terror activity and that it housed a tunnel entrance that led to an underground gathering site. Regarding casualties, one IDF soldier was reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 2 days, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 324. 6 IDF soldiers were reported injured in the Gaza Strip in the past 2 days, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 2,084. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 142 Palestinians were killed in the past 2 days in the Gaza Strip, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 38,153. 87,828 Palestinians are reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began, and there are still estimated between 8,000 and 10,000 Palestinians that are missing in the Gaza Strip. Most of them are presumed buried under the rubble and are dead. Moving on to the West Bank, in the past 2 days there was a settler attack that was reported in the Ma'admeh village in the area south of Nablus. According to the report, which was backed by video footage that I'm showing here, upwards of 20 settlers stormed the village, throwing stones at Palestinians before torching the nearby fields. Other reports also stated that there were other fields that were torched in the Tur Mus'aya area, this is in the area near Ramallah, with video footage also emerging from there as well. In addition, over the past 2 days, there was substantial IDF activity. It was reported in the Balata refugee camp near Tulkarem. Palestinian sources reported that at least 6 Palestinians were injured in the various gun battles. In addition, a Palestinian who was reportedly throwing Molotov cocktails near Beit Ur el-Tahta was shot and killed by the IDF. Other IDF activity was also reported in the past 2 days in the areas of Kalkilia, Hebron, Ramallah, and Jericho. In addition, on July 7th, it was reported that Ahmed Abu al-Hija, who was a prominent figure in the Al-Qassam brigades in Jenin, died from wounds that he sustained in gun battles with the IDF several days ago. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, there are continuous escalations in the last 2 days that are marking the continued rounds of violence and continued escalations between the sides. As part of these ongoing escalations, on July 6th, the IDF carried out a high-profile assassination in the area of Baalbek. This is deep in the heart of Lebanon, some 112 kilometers from the Israeli border. The target of the attack was Maitham al-Attar, who is a senior figure in Hezbollah's air defense units and also acted as liaison between the group and Iran. Regarding Hezbollah activity, Hezbollah fired a barrage of dozens of Katyusha missiles towards the lower Galilee area in the last 2 days, stating that it was targeting IDF bases in retaliation for that assassination. In addition, there were substantial barrages of rockets that were fired throughout the Galilee and the Golan Heights. These included targeting the areas of Shtula, Beit Hillel, Kiryat Shmona, where 2 IDF soldiers were injured from these rockets, other barrages towards areas of Nachal Amud, Kibbutz Dan, Shar Yeshuv, Snir, Dafna, Rajar, Agoshrim, and the list goes on. In addition to this, on July 7th, a U.S. citizen was reportedly badly injured from an anti-tank missile that was fired at the areas of Zar'it. Also on July 7th, a major barrage of over 40 rockets were fired by Hezbollah towards the areas of Mount Meron and the areas of Gorin and Granot HaGalil. In addition to all these, there were several drone attacks that were reported throughout the past 2 days. Drones targeted the areas of Kfar Giladi, Mayan Baruch, Tel Chai, Sde Nehemia, again, and the list goes on. There was also a suicide drone that reportedly detonated on Mount Hermon. Responding, the IDF also launched a series of attacks throughout the areas of southern Lebanon as part of this ongoing escalation. Airstrikes targeted the military structure of Hezbollah in the Kila village, and targets were also attacked in the areas of Yarin and Bin Jbel. In addition, it was reported that a lookout post in the areas of Hula village where it was attacked. IDF also reported a major airstrike that carried out in the Ita Sha'ab region, targeting Hezbollah military structures. Other attacks were also reported in the villages of Ma'aruv and in the areas north of Tzur. Al-Manar also reported that IDF artillery fire was seen in the areas of Dir Siran and Ataiba, and earlier attacks also took place in Marun Aras, Yarun, and Bleda, and again, the list goes on. Other news, on July 6th, it was reported on the Lebanese MTV channel that Hezbollah's deputy leader, Naim Qassem, held meetings with the deputy head of the German intelligence, Uli Dial, discussing the possibility that Hezbollah will agree to withdraw its forces 8 kilometers north into Lebanon in exchange for all sanctions being removed from the group. This report was later denied by Hezbollah, and the group stated that negotiations over the status in southern Lebanon will only commence after a complete ceasefire occurs in the Gaza Strip. Again, this refers to the fact that there's ongoing negotiations between Israel and Lebanon under primarily U.S. auspices, although also France and Germany, trying to come to some sort of diplomatic resolution. Up until now, the government in Israel and the government in Lebanon have both showed willingness to come to an agreement in which the government of Lebanon will deploy its forces down south in Lebanon, Hezbollah will withdraw north, and there'll be negotiations on all border disputes. The only thing is Hezbollah has yet to agree to this, so the deal includes Hezbollah pulling north. Hezbollah said it is not willing to accept this. This is now the first report that Hezbollah might be negotiating the terms in which it will agree to go north. Again, that was denied by Hezbollah, but that report still was the first time that there was any such notion that such negotiations may be taking place. In other news related to the northern front of Israel and southern front of Lebanon, speaking to IDF soldiers today, Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant stated that some 450 terror operatives, including Hezbollah and Palestinian organizations, have been killed in Lebanon since the war began. So this is a number that's significantly higher than the number that Hezbollah cites as operatives that lost in the war. More importantly, Gallant stated that 15 Hezbollah officers at the rank of division commander and higher have been assassinated since the war began. If that's true, that might prove to be far more important than the number of operatives that have been killed. The division commanders in Hezbollah are very well trained, and they are each responsible for different parts of the way Hezbollah has prepared its defenses and attack units in southern Lebanon. So if that is in fact true, that may prove vital if and when escalations do continue. Moving on to some of the political developments, only one report I'll give relates to major protests that occurred in Israel in the last 24 hours, marking 9 months to the war. Defined by the different protest organizations as a day of obstruction, thousands of people took to the streets throughout the country blocking traffic and holding massive rallies. In one of the events, the mother of one of the hostages that is being held in Gaza was hoisted up in a cage above Begin Boulevard in Jerusalem as part of the protest, calling upon Netanyahu to accept a deal and guarantee the release of all hostages in the Gaza Strip. Before I conclude, I am going to add one other anecdote that relates to a question that has repeated itself several times in different comments when people ask me about the different refugee camps in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. Like when I mentioned Nusirat refugee camp or Jenin refugee camp, are these really classic refugee camps or are they built up neighborhoods and cities? It is true that the refugee camps, primarily in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip, are not actually the classic refugee camps that we often think of as just tent cities. They are in fact full neighborhoods that are built up. However, not only are they still officially defined as refugee camps, one of the important facets is calling it a refugee camp denotes where, in fact, the geographic location of these battles are taking place. As tends to happen, most of the refugee camps within the different Palestinian territories sprouted up around the different cities. Thus, there was a main city of Jenin, and as refugees came to the area, a refugee camp sprouted up around the area, becoming Jenin Refugee Camp. Same thing happened in Tulkarem, same thing happened in a lot of different cities, same thing happened in Gaza City, and thus referring to something as Jenin Refugee Camp is meant to actually denote this is different than in the city of Jenin. It is the camp that is nearby. Again, regardless of whether it is built up to be a neighborhood or a city, or if it is still actually a tent city, that does not matter. What matters is this actually denotes the geographic location. This is just a question that has come up in several different comments that people left on YouTube, so I thought I'd answer it here. And on that note, if you do enjoy these reports, please do remember to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I try to answer each one, and if a question repeats itself, as you see I answered in the video also. Those are my highlights from the last 2 days. Thanks for watching.